Well, tomorrow night on Sky News, after months of work from the whole documentary team here at Sky, finally our investigation into the origins of COVID-19 will go to air at 8 p.m. And it's going to be terrific, so make sure you watch it. It's 8 p.m. for an hour, a lot of new revelations in it. I'm really looking forward to finally showing it to you all. As you know, I've been investigating Anthony Fauci's involvement in funding coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology for months now. Some of these discoveries I have already reported. I found out that his agency had funded 60 projects at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I found out that he wrote a paper back in 2012 where he argued that gain-of-function research, that's genetically manipulating coronaviruses to make them even more dangerous and more transmissible, Fauci said that this was worth the risk of a pandemic. And he even funded research, his agency funded coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in conjunction with the Chinese military. I mean, this is just astonishing and unthinkable. Why would America be funding research at a Wuhan lab in conjunction with the Chinese military? Fauci was up to his neck funding research in Wuhan. And it's something he himself, eventually, just a couple of months ago, had to admit.
It was incumbent upon us to study the animal-human interface and to understand what potential these viruses have of infecting humans, which then might damage the United States. So please let me finish. So you don't want to go to Hoboken, New Jersey, or to Fairfax, Virginia, to be studying the bat-human interface that might lead to an outbreak. So you go to China.
This just shows how incredibly stupid Anthony Fauci is. If there's a contagious coronavirus outbreak in China, obviously it's going to affect the rest of the world. And that's exactly what we've seen with this pandemic. What sort of public health official doesn't understand that outbreaks can go global? It's unthinkable that he is still the top medical advisor to the president. He should have been sacked by now. I found out when I was writing my book, What Really Happened in Wuhan, that Fauci didn't even tell his own boss, and that's the health secretary, Alex Azar, that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was genetically manipulating coronaviruses, or that this research was funded by America, or again, still, he didn't even tell him that the ban on gain-of-function research had been lifted in the United States. Instead, he rammed through the decision to lift that Obama-era ban on gain-of-function research. Now, here's what's new. In the documentary that airs on Sky News tomorrow night, I ask President Donald Trump about this. I ask him if in the early days of the pandemic, when Fauci was sitting there in the Oval Office, in every single meeting as the virus was breaking out, if he ever spoke up and told him that he actually knows that there's a lab in Wuhan called the Wuhan Institute of Virology that was engaging in this research, that was genetically manipulating coronaviruses, creating these Frankenstein-like viruses. Here's a sneak peek. Have a look at what Trump says. Did he ever once mention to you that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was genetically manipulating coronaviruses?
Well, no, he didn't. And, you know, Anthony's been in government for many, many years. He's a bureaucratic kind of a guy, a very great promoter. I give him an A+ as a promoter and probably a C or a D as a doctor.
So that's former President Donald Trump admitting that Anthony Fauci stayed silent in Oval Office meetings at the start of the pandemic. He kept quiet on everything he knew about the type of risky research that was underway at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Never mentioned that his agency was funding this and that he actually knew a whole lot about it. In the documentary, we also hear from Chinese defectors who amazingly first discovered that there was a coronavirus spreading in Wuhan back in October 2019. Wade, did you have any sense that the intelligence agencies in the United States in November 2019 were taking this seriously, that there may be a virus spreading in Wuhan?
I felt they were not as concerned as I was, so I tried my best to provide more detail and information. They may not believe a government of a country would do something like that. So I kept repeating myself. In an effort, I tried to persuade them.
And this is then a point that I take up with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and I ask him how concerned he is that the intelligence agencies might have either missed this or either didn't act on these serious warnings that were coming in from highly credible Chinese defectors. And Wei Jingsheng, who you just saw there, he's known as the father of China's democracy movement. He's the most famous Chinese defector to the United States. His defection back in 1997 made global headlines. So I asked Mike Pompeo how worried he is about the possibility that these warnings were missed, and even whether this is a pandemic that could have been prevented had he paid close, well, not he, but had the agencies paid closer attention to the intelligence that was coming in and heeded the warnings of people like Wei Jingsheng. And Pompeo makes some very strong remarks. So don't miss this tomorrow night at 8 p.m.